quickly as well. We do have a very good panel here with us today. Chris Hardesty, who leads on health issues at KPMG here in Singapore and was an author of a report that the Council, along with Sanofi, KPMG and WPP produced earlier this year on healthy aging, will take us through that report very, very shortly. We are joined also by Michael Holden, who's joining us from New York, I believe, and it's very, very early or extremely late for him, depending on your point of view. Michael is the CEO of the Global Coalition on Aging, and he has a long and distinguished career across a range of healthcare settings in both the public and private sector. Also joining online is Janice Chia. She's the founder and managing director of Aging Asia, which is an organization set up to help with the mission of driving innovation in the way future generations age and promoting the concept of healthy aging. And then Ada Wong from our platinum sponsor Sanofi. Ada, as Leon has mentioned, leads on public affairs issues for Sanofi across the Asia-Pacific region. So with that, I'll hand to Chris to take us through some of the key findings from the report before we launch into the discussion.
Thank you. Mic check. Good. Well, hello everyone, and congratulations again to the Council on hosting this forum. I think Chris, you and I have got a little Chris and Chris thing going on today, so people are going to have to get used to that. This is the first panel today. I hope everyone is taking care and ready for interaction, whether you're here in the room or joining us virtually. I did notice in the business sentiments survey from the Council that there's a spirit of optimism for Southeast Asia and that the private sector is looking to engage more on topics like recovery and harmonization. So as was said earlier today, I think healthcare is everyone's business now, and I hope, irrespective of the role you play in the ecosystem, you can help bring some fresh ideas to the discussion. So Chris Hardesty, the director of KPMG's Healthcare and Life Sciences practice here. We've been a longstanding member of the Healthcare Committee. And a few years ago, we started an initiative along with Sanofi and a few others looking at the sustainability of health system design in the region. And one thing that spun out of that work, we're going to talk about that work later today. One thing that spun out of that work was a desire, but a bit of confusion around what prevention actually means. And so that's what we'll get into during the discussion today. So I'm just going to kind of take us through the research that's been done on this topic and then hand it back to Chris so we can get into some discussion there. So when I say there was a bit of confusion around prevention, it's because I think people tend to automatically jump to just, a pure healthy lifestyle, which is of course an ambition. But equally, as we age, we also have to realize that, we are going to need help along the way. And so prevention also means how you can intervene earlier through more cost-effective means to prevent the further deterioration of disease. And so this is the research that we embarked on with the 4 parties, KPMG, EU-ASEAN Business Council, Western Pacific Pharmaceutical Forum, and Sanofi, to look at the economics and policy around healthy aging and immunization. You could argue these are 2 of the hottest sort of topics happening at the moment, so a very, very important piece of research. And I would just like to emphasize that this work is published, it's out there through the Council, so everyone is welcome to leverage it and use it accordingly. So when I say 2 of the hottest topics, that's because there's actually quite some significant policy material related to both topics. But one thing we found in our research is these are basically 2 fast-moving trains that are not well connected, right? So first of all, we've got not only the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, but now the Decade of Healthy Aging that sits underneath that. So that's its own kind of bucket of effort, really looking at the functional ability of people as they age in their life. And there are Asia-Pacific plans that have already been developed and are being rolled out for this particular topic. But equally we've got the Immunization Agenda 2030, so on the same time frame here. And here we're looking at equity in terms of access to vaccination, boosting people's immunity in the region against particularly infectious disease, and also this life course approach to immunization. So our initiative here was to kind of look at where these 2 things can better intersect, where the private sector can support the government with this effort. We spent a lot of time in the field interviewing with different stakeholders and policymakers, and ultimately came and published the report in June. Since then, over the summer, we've been hosting kind of co-creation workshop sessions with the various country-level counterparts, and so that material is being consolidated and will be further published this fall. So that's the effort here that's been undertaken, and I'll just take you through some of the kind of findings. So this is the burning platform for how this research and effort came about. I don't have to tell everyone here about the aging demographic of our society. I think you hear that now in just about every presentation. Clearly in this region, we're not immune. We are going to be an officially aged society before too long, and in fact, within the next 5 years, there'll be more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 5, and that's never happened in our population's humanity. But this is not just about, living longer, but also living healthier. And if you look at the average life expectancy in Southeast Asia, which is currently 71 years, and that's already about 10 years behind some more developed countries. If you deduct for quality adjusted life years or other standardization rates related to, people's disease that they attribute along the way, actually it's more like 61 years of healthy life. And through some other research KPMG has done, we found that for every year of average life expectancy lost, it's a loss of 4% contribution to GDP. So there's some serious economic loss here by not intervening in this situation. And the way I would classify it at the moment with all the rhetoric is more on the demographic dividend. That is looking at the ratio of our working age population to our dependent population, trying to harness this period of time where you've got a kind of balloon in the middle, but that's quickly eroding. So we have to shift our focus into what is more known as a longevity dividend, especially with decreasing dependency ratios, you can see there in the bottom left, and that is how to keep people healthier for longer such that they are positive GDP contributors. And this is where the role of vaccines comes into play. It's the most cost-effective public health intervention of all time. And so we need to do more connectivity between these 2 points. I just zoom in on influenza just to give you an illustrative example of how this issue is manifesting itself. So, despite the WHO target of having 75% of the adult population covered by influenza vaccination, that's the kind of global target. You can see some other developed regions where they land on this target. Pretty much no country in Southeast Asia is really anywhere close to this target. We look at Singapore that does have a national adult immunization schedule, but that has 14% coverage, and therefore influenza causes 157,000 lost workdays every single year. Or in the Philippines, where actually there is access to free vaccination for adults, but the uptake is very low due to hesitancy and kind of miscommunication amongst the communities. And then amongst the other countries in the region, there is essentially no national adult immunization schedule. So a lot of opportunity here to make an impact. And that's where we said really the main issue is that there's not enough connectivity between the decade of healthy aging and the immunization agenda in terms of how it manifests itself in Southeast Asia Secretariat policy. And of course, that's further exacerbated then by delivery barriers like low awareness and increasing hesitancy, not only by people, but also by the healthcare professionals. And then many financial barriers, there's not enough resourcing being allocated to incentivize or encourage people to be able to partake in these programs. I would add that underneath all of this is really an issue of data as well. In many of the countries, there's just insufficient data on this topic, and therefore even having the discussion is a little bit challenged. In the report too, we do have country level snapshots, so this drills down into a lot more detail by country, and again, that's available to you to leverage. That said, we do provide 3 sets of recommendations in the report, so I'll just quickly highlight these and then we can get into some discussions. So we provide recommendations at the government level, at the corporate level, and then at the civil society level. So at the government level, we're encouraging a few things. First of all is just really work with that healthcare practitioner community, encourage them, empower them, train them to be advocates of vaccination rather than the opposite, which does occur sometimes. We could even think here to potentially incentivize healthcare practitioners to partake in the programs such as like they do in the United Kingdom. And then of course just making it easier on people. So in Thailand, for example, convenience was voted the #1 challenge with partaking in these programs. It really wasn't about cost or fear, but it was more just about convenience. And we look at, for example, the Korean model where they allow access points both through the public and private sector to improve the convenience factor. And of course, again, just the data aspect, as we do enhance the surveillance mechanisms of infectious disease and immunization, we would expect over time that that can be used to improve some of the supply negotiation issues that many countries face by having a bit more of a long-term forecasting approach. At the corporate level, which applies to many in the audience today, a couple of things. First of all is just at your corporation getting more engaged in such efforts going on, like life course immunization or influenza vaccination campaigns. You can do the campaigning within your corporation and also making sure that the benefits plans that is being offered to employees does cover something like life course immunization. On that point, we did collaborate with the insurance committee of the council to put some thoughts into this report too, and there's a lot of interest by the insurance group as well, and how they can get more involved in new coverage packages for topics like life course immunization. So we expect to see some more traction happening there too. And then finally, at the kind of civil society level, so first of all, as I said at the beginning, this is a very personal topic, I think, for everyone, so just getting more involved in this effort at a grassroots level. This is a life course approach to immunization, so we need the messaging to be life course as well. It doesn't work to just standardize the rhetoric that goes out. You know, we really have to look at where people are in the journey and meet them on their journey. Again, the access and convenience point, we take the example of places like the United States that has mobile vaccination clinics, or even in Singapore where they do allow vaccination at elder care homes. These models we would recommend to be deployed across wider Southeast Asia too. And then just leveraging the increasingly digital savviness of the elderly cohort, not only just in terms of appointment booking and making the access easier, but making sure that there's no unnecessary spread of misinformation about life course immunization to that population too. So that's that. This is how we kind of bucketize finally the actions that we're recommending to Southeast Asia governments. First of all, just make sure you have a national adult immunization schedule that reflects an integration of the Decade of Healthy Aging with the Immunization Agenda. Secondly, to get it going, you know, increasing the subsidies for people. We look at the UK or Hong Kong where they do provide free vaccination to their populations to get it going. But of course, we're not just going to propose additional expenditures. We look at fundraising opportunities for governments as well. Here we could deploy concepts like health technology assessment specifically for vaccination, or other concepts like individualized health savings accounts, such as what we have here in Singapore, or even from the tax angle. We look at Taiwan where they actually reallocate collection of things like sin taxes toward their life course immunization program. And finally, once we get a little bit of a grasp around that, we would suggest to governments that you don't just start once people are in that elder cohort, but you start that process much earlier in people's lives, such as in their late 40s or 50s, to educate and get them used to and start saving for their own life course immunization needs. Oops, sorry. So I think that's that. Again, there's a dedicated website that's been stood up. I think we can provide that website to everyone. It's got all the collateral out there. It's a really nice place with videos and other information. And yeah, I'll hand it back to you to take us forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris, for that overview of the report. I would recommend it to you. You'll find it on the Council's website as well. It's a very well-written report with lots of information in it on this very pertinent issue. For those of you joining us online, by the way, there is a Q&A function on the Chime platform. You can use that to pose questions. If my old eyes are going to be good enough, I can read them here on the far monitor from me, and I'll try and get through them as well. We'll kick off the discussion, though. I'll turn to Michael first to make sure he's staying awake over there in New York. Michael, I think given the overview of the report you've just heard there from Chris, what do you see as the specific challenges that ASEAN countries are facing on healthy aging, and the potential biggest losses that the region will face if the governments here, and others indeed, like civil society and corporates, don't start to tackle the problem now? And perhaps as a follow-up to that for you as well, I mean, given that we're all largely preoccupied with COVID-19 at the moment, why should governments even be looking at this issue now?
Well, thank you. We're delighted to be here and appreciate the opportunity. It is a little bit late here, or as someone said, early, depending on your perspective, but I've had plenty of coffee, so we're in very good shape. Maybe I'll just make a few points in the context of the very excellent question. We've been looking for years at the challenges related to the aging of societies. The 2 billion of us on the planet over 60, obviously, if one goes back down to 50, it becomes an even larger number. The more old than young, which has already been alluded to, means that we have to think about our challenges in society differently. And so what's happened in many ways, and in a very interesting way, is COVID has brought those kind of challenges, and I might say opportunities, in a very clear form. And I'll highlight a few of those points of what I mean. And so I look at this as, in many ways, with all the tragedy and horrors and the ongoing challenges of COVID, the silver lining of what this pandemic has been teaching us and particularly in the context of where many of us have already been around the healthy aging framework. As was already said by Chris, the Decade of Healthy Aging launched earlier this year in 2021. So we are in that kind of mega trend. But let me highlight a few points. Number one, COVID, like aging itself, underscores the central importance of public health. Public health is now at the top of everyone's agenda, whether you're talking about bluntly C-suites, the Prime Minister's office, or as we say in America, kitchen tables. And that's not least because as a consequence of COVID, like the aging framework itself, we now know both intuitively and explicitly that what we get right around public health is intimately and profoundly connected to economics. We will not have economic growth, we will not have fiscal sustainability without an attention to public health. So whether we're talking about the importance of vaccines, and we of course know about COVID-19, it's already been alluded, and in your great report, flu is an interesting example where we want to have more prevention strategies. What better than a life course of immunization? We know from disease states, from Alzheimer's to osteoporosis, these are with us as we age. And now, as a result of COVID, in confluence with the Decade of Healthy Aging and that mega trend, putting public health at the center is critical. The second point that we've been learning out of COVID, and also for many of us who have been looking at this through the lens of aging, is the importance of innovation. We will not solve for this without innovation. And we know that there's innovation in therapeutics, innovation in vaccines. Obviously, the COVID-19 vaccine highlights this, but also innovation in the use of digital technology and digital health technology, or innovation in caregiving. And we see all of that through COVID-19, which has already been with us and challenging for us with respect to the aging lens. The third element is the critical importance of scalability and distribution. And this can happen, we know best, through public-private partnerships. So as an opening kind of introductory sort of idea here, whether we're talking about a life course of immunization for flu, or we're now talking about COVID-19, or we're looking about the challenges of, osteoporosis or Alzheimer's, both COVID-19 highlighting the critical importance of this linkage between public health and economics on the one hand, and innovation on the other. A term that many of us have been aware of, I would highlight. We now know that spending on health innovation must be seen as an investment, not just a cost. And this is as true with respect to flu vaccination for 50-year-olds as for 78-year-olds, as it is for finding a cure to Alzheimer's, or a predict and prevent approach to bone health and osteoporosis. So let me stop there and look forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
I think you've raised some very pertinent points there, particularly on the need for innovation. Janice, when part of Aging Asia, you believe in innovative approaches for healthy aging. Perhaps you can explain a bit more about that to us here, and how you can use those to make sure that the challenges of aging can themselves be transformed into economic opportunities here in Asia, and how you see that being achieved going forward.
Janice, you're on mute.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. When we look at the challenges of aging, if you turn it around, it's an opportunity indeed. And we're looking right now at an economy that's driven by the silver population. When we look at a lot of factors on aging, sometimes we focus a lot on the health portion, but I think increasingly, and since COVID, there's a lot of awareness for mental health and how we can reduce social isolation and loneliness that all contributes towards health longevity. One of the areas that we've been looking at is innovations in how we engage older people. Once they leave the workforce, is that it's just pausing of one career. How do we help them to find that next thing that they find purpose in and they enjoy, be it volunteerism or employment, whether it's paid or partially paid or contract work, part-time work. It's about having a purpose and a reason to get up each day and having something that they really enjoy. But if you broaden that, and if you look at countries like Japan, we've seen a lot of outstanding models that have emerged. And some of them relate to how we can engage persons with dementia to even be employed and to be able to contribute productively to their surroundings and in their neighboring communities. And I think employment it might be one of the big game changers. We want older people not just to feel that they are doing something, but to feel active and possibly even paid. So the other way I've thought of is also micro entrepreneurship. Although looking for a job, and we've seen many job seekers who are age over 60 express that it's not easy for them to find employment at an older age. But if you think about it, they have so much energy and experience, and they could all be this huge micro entrepreneurship force out there. And if companies want to really invest in the business of aging, I would say you should also invest in the people. Let's create funds that could help these entrepreneurship opportunities for older people, funds that encourage the intergenerational relationships. Young startups could be partnered with older people to gain experience from them. And I think these are opportunities, but the one I really want to focus on and emphasize is really opportunities for older people, whether you're frail or whether you have any disabilities or whether you have dementia, is can they find small jobs and employments within the neighborhoods that they live in. And on a daily basis, they can continue to be engaged. And if you're working, sometimes you forget about the pain. If you're working, sometimes you're so absorbed in it and you enjoy it so much, you won't think about all the health issues you have, but you think about how I can contribute to this role and do better. And working at an older age may not only just be about money. It's about the other parts as well, being part of a community, being engaged, and being able to support each other and to age in place. Aging in place is the last point that I'll bring up, of course, because as we age towards organized countries that are aging in place, and we want everyone to be able to live at home longer, health becomes very important. They need to maintain that independence, so without falling down, they need to stay strong, they need to be mentally and physically engaged. So I think these are all important factors that support aging in place for us in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Janice. I certainly want to age healthily if I can as well and stay mentally fit and able. Ada, I'll come to you now from the commercial point of view on this. I mean, you work for a company that makes a range of products which can actually help us not get diseases as we get older. How do you see the role of the private sector in this very important topic going forward?
Thanks, Chris. Good day to my fellow panelists and all participants here. I think the topic on healthy aging today is really close to my heart. I'm in mid-40s and I have 2 young kids still elementary school. That's why my husband and I always say that we need to stay healthy and active in order for my kids and for my grandkids long into the future. But put the personal reasons aside, I think, as Chris mentioned, prevention is very important. For me, prevention is how to embrace the concept of prevention in terms of healthy aging, how to have a healthy lifestyle, diet, how to take good care of yourself. But as mentioned by many folks here, that the concept of healthy aging or the concept prevention is not really fully embraced in Asia, including in ASEAN. If I take elder immunization as example, that many people when it comes to elder immunization, they have a higher chance to get flu or pneumonia when you're getting older because your immune system is getting weaker. But then, and the best way to maximize the benefit immunization, taking life course approach. As Chris mentioned earlier, the vaccine coverage rate for flu and pneumonia is much lower in this region. And according to WHO, it's way below the target mentioned by WHO. That's why Sanofi has been working with many external stakeholders to promote life course immunizations. Because think about that, when you're getting older, your immune system is getting weaker, you get complications out of flu and pneumonia. The quality of the life of elder population can be severely impacted, not just from a health perspective, also from the economy, from the healthcare system. That's why I think with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's increased awareness in terms of vaccine, in terms of vaccination. The policymakers should leverage this opportunity to promote life course immunization as part of the healthy aging policy, and how to partner multi-stakeholders to further promote about life course immunization. And in terms of the awareness, in terms of adoption, I think that's a very important part.
So you talk about the importance of a life course immunization. So as we get older, let's have more influenza jabs, let's make sure we're not catching the flu. But how do you encourage people to actually take up these immunizations? Do you think, and perhaps Michael and Janice and Chris might want to chip in as well, what do you all think about this? How do you go about convincing people of the importance of it? Do you think things like the COVID-19 vaccination drives actually have brought the idea about vaccinations and immunizations more to the fore?
Yeah, I think definitely when, I mean, how many people talk about vaccinations before the COVID-19 pandemic? Now becomes a daily terminology, even among the older folks. That's why I think it's a very great opportunity to make sure how to educate the elderly population. Sometimes not just elderly, if in Asia context, because many people actually living together with the elderly, living together with your parents, your grandkids, how to make sure that ecosystem to promote life course immunization from pregnancy to babies, to adolescents, to elders, to elderly. Make sure that the concept can be instilled, even when they're young, even when they're early elderhood, to make sure they get ready before they're getting too old. This is a perfect time when we talk about vaccine or vaccination. And that's a cliche to say that vaccine doesn't save life. It's vaccination. If we just vaccine out there, no matter how innovative it is, if no one is going to take it, it won't bring benefit to the society or individual.
I can suggest a comment on that if it's possible. I think that a critical element is to focus on particular stakeholders. So I'll give you 3 examples. My wife and I actually went into our local pharmacy yesterday and we got our booster. And when I was there, the pharmacist said, "Would you like your flu vaccine?" And I said, "Yes." So this is an opportunity. This is a kind of stakeholder that, and an opportunity that never existed before. And for millions of people around the world who are now, as Ada said, focused on vaccination, that in a way that perhaps they hadn't been prior. And we can learn behaviors this way. A second stakeholder is the caregiver. Janice and I have had a lot of work together in this space, and we know that the caregiver is not just the formal caregiver who works for, Home Instead, for example, but it's the family caregiver. And the 48 or 52-year-old, usually the daughter, certainly in America and many European countries, but son or daughter, will focus on wanting their parents to get vaccinated, to have the flu vaccine, for example, as appropriate, but then they won't even think about themselves. So now, because of the highlighted awareness, this caregiver is in scope. That's a second kind of stakeholder that we hadn't maybe thought of before. And the third is the employer. Again, the employer, whomever they are, has a direct interest in a life course of immunization. They now understand, not only because of their interest in public health, but of economic activity. We literally have closed down economies because of the pandemic. And vaccination will help us as has been helping us open those economies. That's true of all vaccination and certainly the life course. We've had for decades a good program on childhood immunization. Let's now have a good program for adult immunization. That is as important, particularly when there are well over 2 billion of us in scope. That never before existed on the history of the planet.
I think just to add to that as well, yes. If we look at where older people live, looking at seniors, the communities, let's start from the communities. I think there's a lot of effort in healthcare institutions and places of leisure and even gym facilities trying to spread the news and encourage more people with the vaccination. But I think also it's down to the hairdressers within that same neighborhood, the restaurants or the coffee shops that they patronize, down to the supermarkets. So I think immunization efforts in future and awareness for seniors would really go down to the community level. And I would even see, I think it'd be more and more common that we'll see small booths where, it's providing educational material for them. In Japan, the 7-Eleven, the convenience stores are used quite well for all kinds of conveniences down to dry cleaning. I think in future, that could also be small hubs of information kiosks for seniors.
Yeah, I would take the comments on our knowledge of the vaccination space, amongst the broader masses one step further and say that actually average health literacy, generally speaking, has raised quite a bit, and that's always been a bottleneck in trying to implement public health policy programs, right? I think where we're still getting stuck a bit in this part of the world is what's called the prevention paradox, and that is the more, in some cases, effort you put on prevention, the more issues you create in the near term by, for example, screening people more and finding more disease cases. So I think, yes, there's some work to be done at the individual layer, but it's also kind of one step up in terms of how healthcare practitioners are supporting or maybe potentially blocking the cause, or how health systems are designed in this case, or even the payer organizations. And that's where I think something like life course immunization amongst prevention style activities is a very proven, cost-effective technique that can be driven further. And I would kind of put that in the bucket of a health creation exercise, not something that is potentially, contributing to this prevention paradox.
Because I'm the moderator, I'm allowed to be a bit controversial every now and then. So for childhood immunizations, and for instance, we make them compulsory. You can't go to some schools, you can't do things unless you've had certain jabs as a child. Any merit in saying to our seniors, you really do need to get yourself vaccinated against certain diseases to help you prevent getting them going forward? I mean, we have some countries now differentiating what things you can do with or without a COVID-19 vaccine. So why not extend that to other immunization treatments? Any of you want to take this one on?
It's a rather challenging topic. I mean, my understanding in come to adult immunization, there's no mandatory in the world. Personally, I don't think it's the best method to make it mandatory. There's always carrot and stick, how to make it more encouraging, more transparent, to let our elder population to understand about the benefits of vaccination. I think that's the best way to do that. And there are many incentives over there, many education materials. Like in Australia, they use carrot and stick approach really well as well, how to encourage the older population to get a flu vaccine. As Janice mentioned, how to make it easier for them to access, and I think it's another incentive approach. Like in Taiwan, during flu season of time, you don't need to go to any community pharmacy. You can just go to the subway to get your flu jab. I think from access point perspective, from education perspective, awareness perspective, that would be sufficient to encourage our elder population to get vaccination.
If I might, first of all, your question, while it may be provocative, it's a question that's on all of our minds, and certainly here in America, we're debating in many ways, very heated debates, not only every day, but every hour. But it's a debate worth having. It's a debate we should be having. And again, one way that we've been thinking about it is as a result of COVID and public health and economics being intricately linked now, and also prompted through the decade of healthy aging, there are certain topics that find their way to the top of agendas when one looks at certainly large employers. It's automatic that they will have a chief technology officer now. 15 years ago, we didn't have chief technology officers, or at least in America, and I'm sure many countries around the world, we will have chief diversity officers. The idea of, what does our employee population look like, literally and figuratively. Well, we may be at a point now where we have a chief public health officer or something like that. And a chief public health officer will help each employer make their decisions on what they want to do with respect to their employees, their communities, and their customers. And I would take, to be very blunt, the libertarian approach that, some will make it and have that decision, and others will maybe take a different approach. But this is the right debate to have. And again, what we're learning with COVID, we now can apply, for example, to flu or to other medicine compliance even that we know has been poor in the past.
Okay, thanks. Let's move it on a bit away from vaccinations and immunization topics and talk about the broader role that society can play in all of this as well. I mean, here in Asia, we often have family units where parents will be living with their children. It's very different in the West. My other half is aghast at how we treat our elders in the West. She thinks it's absolutely despicable. But what role can the family units play here in Asia in trying to look after our seniors better, look after their mental health? When Janice mentioned mental health earlier, and actually encourage them to live healthier lives by taking better care of themselves. Is there much more that we as society can do in that respect? Azadi, you want to take this one first?
I lived together with my parents in Hong Kong until I was 30. It's a quite common practice in Asia. I think as a daughter, I think that's important to play the role is education. How can you try to get the information and share with them? I mean, even my dad's now 80 years old. He can access the internet, he use FaceTime to talk to the grandkids. But I think education sharing as individuals is very important, that guide them to the right information. There's tons of information out there on internet or from society. How to play an important role to share the information with them, how to encourage them to take a healthy lifestyle and diet, do exercise on a daily basis, eat healthy, stay active. As Janice mentioned, you need to do something in order to stay active when you're getting older. I think that role from individual extend to the community in society, even from a country perspective, is very important.
To Janice, the role you're playing at Aging Asia, do you doing a lot of work in this area in terms of helping to educate families, to help educate their elders at the same time?
Yes, we do work on multiple fronts. Of course, we do work with the industries, and then also on the senior level, how can we reach out to them? So we work with them through, let's say, the community clubs, through the active aging gym program that I'm also involved in, Aspire 55. We also work with them through education, public education forums, the World Aging Festival coming up, incorporating a lot of opportunities for them to learn what are the best ways for them to age in good health. And on a regular basis, we've been doing a lot of webinars this year because of COVID, and trying to really reach out to them to give them opportunities to express themselves. So, on one hand, we're giving them the information, but on the other hand, they also want to be able to give feedback and to share about how they're feeling about all these things that are happening during COVID or during their health and immunization. But back to one of your earlier questions about what society can do and what families can do, I think we don't spend enough time with looking after the transition for older people as they go into that aging, as they progress into the aging world, as we do when we spend with children. When children hit the school-going age, parents devote a lot of time looking for the best schools, the best early childhood education programs, the best enrichment programs. As children of our parents, we don't spend enough time doing those activities. And the last part also is accompanying them on that first few weeks of engaging in new activities and helping them to form the new networks. Making new friends is not that easy, even for myself, I think. At all ages, not everyone finds it easy to make new friends. And for older people themselves, some are naturally outgoing, but some are not. So I think because aging is not one homogeneous society and group, we have to look at different ways to address the personalization and the needs of older people.
I think you raised an important point there, Janice. I mean, for all of us, of course, we all look at our children and the youth and think they're the future. But actually having seniors around us to help guide us and making sure they are economically active and not a burden on lives becomes very, very important as well. Perhaps a question, I'll throw this one to Chris and then to Michael first of all. How do we get governments to take the idea of healthy aging more seriously?
So actually the way I was going to answer that prior question, and I think I answered this one as well, it's my view. I mean, I would love to hear from some of the others that the healthy aging topic is a unique situation at the moment because it is so well documented at the kind of global, regional policy level. I mean, there's a specific plan in place. Even you talk about integrating the elderly into the design. That's actually one of the principles of the Decade of Healthy Aging and down into the Asia Pacific, plans. And I can tell you, through the research in this report, we found a lot of G2G activity going on. Japan has been mentioned a few times in this session today. The Japanese government is actually advising governments in this region on how to prepare and how to get ready. So I almost flip the question around and think, what is then our role going to be as a council, right, in this sort of what aspect can we play? And that's where I think now the level of activity is at the country level to adopt these plans, at the corporate level, and at the individual level. And I think where there's room to play and to help governments move it along a bit further is, every country, every subculture has its own philosophy on a topic like aging. You've heard a few different examples today about whether you live together or other maybe religious principles. And so I think that's the role we need to play as, the council and individual is helping to unlock with some creativity how ultimately these plans get driven down at the country and even sub-country level, because it is fairly well documented. I mean, there's a lot of activity in place. As I said, G2G is already happening, so we need to kind of insert ourselves into the discussion, I think.
Thanks. Michael, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'd suggest one of the earlier points that Janice Chia was making is really critical, and that is the relationship between healthy aging and active aging. We know that remaining active has a huge impact on mental health, of course, but that also then has an impact on physical health or physical deterioration. And in that context, and Chris just alluded to the principles of the Decade of Healthy Aging, as many of us will know, there are 4: integrated care, long-term care, age-friendly communities. But the 4th, and in some ways the first and overarching, is that we get rid of the culture of ageism. And it's interesting that both the WHO and the United Nations, or the joint sponsors of the Decade of Healthy Aging, the first report, and right now the only report in 2021 that they've come out with, is on the adverse effects of this culture of ageism. And so it's not only about healthcare, but about many other aspects, including, what can governments do around retirement age? Our retirement age of 60 or 65 was basically invented by Otto von Bismarck in the 1880s. Here we are in the 21st century, still using that same age frame when many of us, thankfully, will be living another 30 years. So the idea of what government can do is to have a holistic public policy approach, not only on healthcare, but also on pension, on employment, and even education. That education for the children is central and critical. Education for adults, just like we always thought of childhood immunization, now let's have adult immunization. We always think of childhood education, let's have adult education, and link that to the possibility of work as one is 70 or 80. So I think government has a lot that they can do, and it's working directly with the private sector.
Janice, do you see governments in Southeast Asia doing enough on this topic? Or do you think they should be doing a lot more?
I think we could do more in terms of looking at creative approaches, innovative approaches to employ and engage older people in unconventional roles, not typical employment jobs. I mean, we have to get creative. I think that's and you know, in this new world, that's the opportunity there. You know, one day I hope that it will become a norm when a person who's 85 says he's still working, and people around him don't go, "Oh, you're still working at 85," or, you know, you're engaged in this job. You know, it should be the norm, and you know, hopefully that is where we can, you know, that's when we know we've truly succeeded in cutting down the barriers of ageism. When you are working, you know, as long as you like, and you can find creative ways to find the right employment. So older people are not, you know, just saying that, you know, there's these jobs available in this pool of jobs, but no, we maybe in future people have to create their own jobs, and even seniors who are in senior activity centers, they could be creating their own jobs, and you know, there could be a private sector or a government funded, co-funded model that will encourage such job creation as well as entrepreneurship for seniors.
Okay, thank you. Reminder to our audience who are online to use the question section on the Chime platform. If you've got any questions, I can't see any coming through at the moment. If anybody in the audience here live with us has a burning question to ask, please just raise your hand and I'll come to you as well. Let's talk a bit more about the corporate role. And we heard Michael earlier talking about perhaps the idea of corporates in the future having public health officers. I mean, and it was something that did come out in the report as well, for my American Chris as opposed to the Pommy Chris here. What role do you think corporates can play more in helping their employees? I mean, Janice was talking about people working for longer, and that helps their mental health, it helps their physical health. Should companies be looking to employ more and more older people?
Yeah, I'll be very quick on this one because I want to hear what some of the others have to say. So, you know, in the report, and part of what I mentioned earlier, what needs to happen now as a result of the macro policies that exist. You know, we did outline those two opportunities we saw for corporates. So one was basically just to engage better in the kind of educational public health campaigns going on, including by making sure that, because one thing that has happened over time with public health is there is a shifting emphasis on the role of the corporate and actually, you know, taking responsibility for their employees' healthcare. So there's almost a bit of a duty in some way of corporates to make sure that their benefit scheme and that they're engaged in these public health vaccination programs. And that's also where we saw maybe some opportunity for, you know, benefits management companies or insurance companies or maybe other stakeholders to kind of step in and help with a little bit of that financial gap that currently exists in implementing some of these policies. I guess what I would leave kind of open-ended, and happy to hear from others on the panel or others in the room, is this idea that, you know, every business is in healthcare today, right? I mean, whatever respective role you play. And so there's all kinds of creative, unique ideas and partnerships that can be born out of not just taking care of people, but actually what, you know, productive GDP contributing role in healthcare that you can play. And I mean, one example is employing people for longer, but, you know, there's going to be all sorts of creative, what I call health creation activities, not just health for all or health for wealth, but health creation activities that are born out of corporates who are going to step up a little bit and create new business units or take some unique role in the ecosystem that wasn't expected. So you can look at companies like maybe Grab or, you know, banks like DBS who I think are really going to surprise us over the next couple of years on some of the roles they take.
Michael, Janice, Ada, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would, go ahead, Janice.
Go ahead.
Oh, no. Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, thank you. So just on that excellent point, what shocks me the most, and this is true everywhere, for better or worse, is the degree to which employers or businesses are not recognizing that in their absolute direct commercial interest is to see an older population as a customer base. And if you're going to see, you know, the 60 plus or 55 plus demographic, which is very diverse and very different, an 82-year-old might be different than a 62-year-old, but that age demographic as a market opportunity, in order to have a strategy around that, you may want a 73-year-old in your organization working on marketing plans. So, you know, these things are connected. Right now, they're not happening in as much as one would expect, and I think logically is not only good for society, but in the self-interest of every business. In America, we know the data that 70% of all disposable income is held by people 60 and over. Why, therefore, every company in America does not have an aging strategy is a mystery.
That's a very good point. Janice.
Yeah, I think we should calculate silver GDP, and maybe Singapore will be one of the leaders in that, to show the economic contributions of older people past the age of 60. As an economic exercise, as a social exercise, I think it'll be really fantastic to see more older people engaged. And I think we put a lot of responsibility for corporates to ask them to employ older people. From the corporate's point of view, I think they also have to look at different ways that they can employ older people productively, generate income, as well as look at their business goals. So I think the responsibility is not just on corporate, it's on all of society. So it's on our entire community to look at ways, creative ways within all of us that we can engage older people.
Thanks. Okay, we have about 9 minutes left, and we have to finish on time because we have the minister coming on next. So I'm going to go around the four of you. Or is there a question out in the audience? I'm blinded by the light, sorry.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. I'm Marian. I represent Yong Yu Lin School of Medicine, and I work in the healthcare system to respond to the corporate wellness and Michael question on whether there's well-being practices. Just to reflect, the NUHS system, National University Healthcare System, has recently got our first Chief Wellbeing Officer. And the Chief Wellbeing Officer is different from the HR role insofar that we are focusing on the mental health of the healthcare system, as well as also the bullying and harassment, not just of healthcare, but any organization. In research that I've been doing, the Chief Wellness Officer course, there was only one in the world from Stanford, runs with the chief wellness people in the organization, normally in healthcare, and that's very intensive, and Stanford obviously can't do it online immediately, but we're in discussions with them. However, they have a physician wellbeing course that's run online for free, and this physician wellbeing course is for directors of units, not just individual physicians, and it's now remote, and it's free because there was a foundation that granted this course for free. So it's from Stanford. I can send out a link if you all want. But in that same circumstance, we're trying to think of how to do chief wellbeing officer courses for general corporates so that they can also, be more effective in leading the way on public health, mental health, yes, but also health. And HR, we find, is a bit harder to reach this role because they also still do talent retention and benefits and everything else. So they're better for exercise and well-being in a general holistic way, but less so for the mental health. So I thought that would be of interest to all of you.
Thank you. So should corporates all have a chief well-being officer? Help us with our mental health, help us with our physical health, help us educate us about perhaps things like life course immunizations?
We do a lot in terms of exercise, yoga, promote healthy diet in the company as well. I think go back to original questions in terms of immunization. I do believe the access point is very important. That's why corporate or company can definitely play a point is in terms of employee immunizations program. When I visit a number of universities in Singapore, the one thing they told me that is when the school offer immunizations program on site, they can see that the rate increase a lot. I think definitely it make it easier for people go for immunization as part of the exercise, make their life easier. It can definitely make a huge achievement over there.
Thank you. Okay, we have about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to give you all the wrap-up question. We'll start with Michael and then Janice and Ada, and then end up with handsome Chris at the end over there. Perhaps you can give me the top 3 things you'd like to see happen to help improve healthy aging going forward, keep our elders healthier and more active. Michael, please, you start off.
Thank you. It's been a great session and appreciate being part of it. So in a global aging society, which I think we've clearly proven that we are in, we should start thinking of health not as an end in itself, but as a central partner to economic growth and fiscal sustainability. So the implications for that, for government, which was an earlier question, is that ministers of finance and economy should have as much interest in health as do health ministers. And therefore, that will take them down a path, take all of us down a path, where we understand spending on health innovation, including critical prevention tools like life course immunization, adult immunization, as investments, not only in our health, but in our economic sustainability. So this is a critical lesson out of COVID, and it's a critical element of the decade of healthy aging. To remember that having health as part of it is, as I say, only a pathway to economic and fiscal sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Janice.
I think learning about aging should start earlier. It's included in the curriculum, and what happens to older people over the life course. Some early education for our entire society. That's important. Second thing is, I think in order to encourage health longevity is to how can we look at ways to engage the sedentary population to exercise and to encourage those who are even after leaving the corporate world, that they or leaving their employed positions, how can they continue to have that social engagement? So I think social engagement is the second most important point. And the last one is aging overlaps all sectors of our economy. And I share Michael's point very much that it's about everyone coming together to address this and to work on it together. So it's not just as one silos, but it's a total community effort.
Thank you. Ada, your last views?
The first one I would say, holistic policy, how to make sure incorporate life course immunization as part of healthy aging. The second one, very similar to what Janice mentioned, is multi-stakeholder approach. No one can solve the issues alone. How can all stakeholders work together? The third one related to what Handsome Chris mentioned earlier, prevention as an investment, is not cost.
Chris, you get the tough role going last.
God, I hope that name doesn't stick around. Why do you say that on the stage? I'll just give you one. There's a saying in public health, which is sometimes bad policies are not just created by bad people, but also good people who stand by and don't take action on what they see as an issue, right? And we do have an ecological problem in health system design, which is good intentions are designed at the macro level, but then they're not getting all the way down to the micro level. We talked a lot about that today. I think on a topic like healthy aging or immunization, it's so personal now. We've heard a lot of personal stories today. So I really just think that everybody here in the room has a bit of a duty walking away from this session, whether it be at your own corporate organization. The example was given of the NUHS. I mean, they run an amazing webinar series that is free to join. You can educate yourself. And just within your own family unit, right, take some ideas from today and start to socialize that within your own family units. And I guess I'll just put in a plug for the council as well. It's an opportunity to, if you're really interested in this topic, want to step up and try to help make a difference, working with the council is a great way for that. Back to you.
Thank you, Chris.
Extra handsome Chris.
I'll try and sum all this up if I can for you all. So healthy aging, very, very important for all of us. We all want to live longer, healthier, more enjoyable lives. Central indeed for economies going forward. Us older people, I do class myself in that bracket, can contribute more to society going forward as well, not just in terms of being economically productive, but in terms of helping the people around us. I think Michael was talking about the grey dollar. The grey dollar is very important. Companies shouldn't ignore it. They should ignore it at their peril. But it does take a whole of society effort to make sure that we are all living healthier. We need to educate each other, look after our elders, and help them look after us. So I think with that, we'll bring this panel to an end. Thank you very much indeed, Michael, for joining us in the early hours there from New York. Janice, thank you for joining us. I know you've got a busy week this week, there are a few events that you're organising as well. Thank you, Ada, and indeed thank you, Snoffy, for being our platinum sponsor.